Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants, has an extra friend this week. It is Heather Prusak from Channel 4, WIVB. And joining us, as usual, is Matthew Fairburn, covers the Bills for The Athletic, and Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Global Systems. And John Scott.
And John Scott.
There goes John Scott from Spectrum.
Special appearance.
Yeah, we'll see more. Hopefully we see an additional cameo from John a little bit later. I'm happy with him coming on and adding his insight, but he seems unwilling.
Maybe Otto. Maybe we can even get Otto in here too.
All right. That's fine. We're a family program. Well, we have family members on the program. It might not necessarily be for family consumption. Not everyone in the family would enjoy this type of content.
The F doesn't stand for family. We'll put it that way.
That's true. So I'm just, well, I guess we should say a few introductory remarks. Heather Prusak has been in Western New York for a long time. All the viewers on YouTube, if you're watching Tim Graham and Friends that way or listening to the podcast on your platform of choice, know Heather from her time at Channel 2 also, but she is the person who props me up on Sundays on Buffalo Kickoff Live, and I am her Robin. I am the Robin to her Batman, and
we have fun.
She's agreed to come on the show and tell some secrets.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we have fun. I think the word shenanigans is something that we say a decent amount, and other things that I can't repeat right now, but you know.
I like the idea. We had some laughter in the studio that we were having a good time in the show on Friday night, and they should cut a promo with us having fun because, I mean, no fault of their own. It's generally company policy, but I don't see the other stations even in the same room together. It's all floating heads via Zoom. So we actually get in the studio and give some real analysis on the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, it's nice that Channel 4 lets us actually be in person, socially distancing, of course. But that is nice that we don't just have to rely on Zoom and a computer screen to see each other. So we have a good time on Buffalo Kickoff Live.
Like this fucking podcast.
It is like a podcast.
Yes.
So, all right, a lot happened over the weekend, and we've had a couple of days to digest it. I don't know that we need to get into what happened against the Denver Broncos. It was such a lopsided game. The Denver Broncos also are the type of opponent that, do we really care? There's really not much to get into X's and O's wise. The Bills, the main story being that they clinched the division title for the first time in 25 years, and we saw the reaction from Bills fans out at the airport. And I think that what we're seeing too, another topic that I'd like to get into, the Carolina Panthers today fired general manager Marty Herney, and the Bills could be on the verge of having their staff get raided. That won't be the only opening. We've had Lake Dawson. He's the assistant director of college scouting for the Bills. His name has already popped up as a possible candidate for the GM opening in Carolina. There will be other staffs that get axed as soon as the season's over. And the Bills, as we've praised Brandon Beane on this show and wherever else I can, has been masterful at assembling a brain trust within that front office of former general managers. There's a lot of NFL experience. Guys like Brian Gaine, Joe Shane, Dan Morgan, Lake Dawson. Throw in some other names, guys, because I'm going to forget Dennis
Malik
Hickey,
Boyd.
the former general manager.
Malik Boyd's been around a while.
Malik
Terrence
Boyd.
Gray, director of college
Terrence
scouting.
Gray. It's there are so many options. I don't think that Brandon Beane's going to be able to keep this band together. And then Sean McDermott. Maybe Leslie Frazier starts getting some love again. He didn't get any interviews last year, but Brian Dable, a lot of people assume he's gone. So I guess since I'm on a roll, just rattling off names there, let's stick with that topic. What do we think regarding the Bills and continuity?
You know, it's a blessing and a curse, successes, because while it's great what the Bills are doing and it's great the success they're having and they're winning, then it's also the curse part of it is what you said, that these coaches and this front office, they're going to get attention from other teams and other opportunities. So it's really tough when you're trying to sustain success and you're having it, but then it's just normal that guys are going to leave for other opportunities. I know Brandon Beane said on his Zoom call after he signed his contract extension that he surrounds himself with people that are smarter than him. And as we all mentioned, the kind of experience that's in that front office, it's tough when now you have guys that are going to potentially leave, and I'm sure that some of them will. So yeah, I mean, I would say success is just it's a blessing and a curse, I guess.
I think the most significant potential loss is probably Brian Dable at this point. On the field, immediate impact that would be felt. Losing Brian Dable would be somewhat of a tough transition, I think. You know, there's the logical internal replacement of Ken Dorsey to maintain some consistency in how Josh Allen is coached. And it's not to take away from Josh Allen and what he's done, but I think Brian Dable deserves a lot of credit for the way this offense is operating. And you can't really overestimate how important that play caller quarterback relationship is. You can look any number of places, Philadelphia, Minnesota, you know, the way the offense can go up and down depending on who's calling the shots. The front office, I think, was inevitable basically from the start because of what Tim mentioned, that these guys all came in with a you know, strong resume. Dan Morgan was, you know, kind of a future GM before he ever stepped foot in the offices at One Bills Drive. Joe Shane's been working his way up. Blake Dawson had GM interviews. Dennis Hickey was a GM. So, you know, that was natural. But I think that's just think of all the names we just rattled off in that front office. I think the front office is more than deep enough to withstand these losses. You think when they started, they had Brian Gain as their director of player personnel. He leaves to take the GM job at the Texans. They hire Dan Morgan to replace him, and then they get Brian Gain back. So it's like they basically already have an extra, you know, guy built into the front office from where they were.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, and correct me, please. But I mean, we're doing this, we're taping this live, and I can't go back and look it up. But didn't Brian Gain interview for the job that Brandon Beane got? Wasn't that a situation where they got them both?
I'm pretty sure.
Am I not remembering that right?
I think you might be right. I don't know for sure off the top of my head. I know it was a pretty small list of people that interviewed. I think
Blake Dawson turned down the GM job with the Miami Dolphins.
Right. So he's been on people's radar for a long time. It's interesting how the staff is constructed. Two of the most important people to what they've been doing. Malik Boyd is the director of pro personnel, and they've been A+ in free agency over the last few years. And then Terrence Gray is the director of college scouting, but it's the assistant director of college scouting, Blake Dawson, kind of getting a lot of these, you know, his name's getting thrown around in a lot of these GM openings. So I think the front office can handle this, even if they're not going to lose all of them. It's not like there's 5 general manager openings right now. There's some quality candidates out there outside of Buffalo. There seems to be some talk Nick Caserio could get a potential spot. You know, he works with the Patriots now. So there's maybe they lose 1, tops 2. 2 would be, you know, pretty significant if they lost 2, but they have the people in place to make it work and withstand that. It's more the coaches, I think, that would have a more immediate on-field impact. I think Brandon Beane's respected enough and connected enough around the league, and people see what they're building, that it would be viewed as an attractive place to work in the front office and probably in the coaching staff as well, now that they have a quarterback and some receivers making some noise.
I will say, if real quick on the point about Brian Dable, if they do lose him, I will say, well, it's going to be a loss that's felt with this offense. If there is a time to lose him, at least it's now. With Josh Allen going, he'd be going into year 4 instead of like maybe year 2 or earlier in his development. I think
or had he gotten the job last year with Cleveland when he interviewed with it, and then they don't have this building, this is a foundational season for Josh Allen. We'll look back on this as if things turn out as, you know, when it happened.
So
that's true.
That's what I will say, is that if there is any silver lining, if they do lose Brian Dable, at least it's now at this point in Josh Allen's development where he's really starting to turn a corner and he's really taking off instead of earlier, or again, as you mentioned, Tim, last year.
I think you now have a quarterback who can provide his input to whoever the offensive coordinator is. He has more ownership of what he's doing and what the offense is doing. Clearly, there's a relationship that's developed between not just Josh Allen and Brian Dable, but also Ken Dorsey with both of those guys. And so I know there's a lot of issues surrounding how those top level coordinators are hired. The lack of diversity in those spots, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And so people might look at it a certain way. If Ken Dorsey, the quarterback's coach, who's white, just gets bumped right up into that seat. But it also happens to be, they're going to handle this very delicately, I would imagine, if Brian Dable leaves, because they had so much success and they probably don't want to change a thing about it. And some of that will be out of their control if somebody hires Dable, but Ken Dorsey does make the most logical sense in terms of, I don't know how much play calling he's done over his time. He's had kind of an interesting career bouncing around, but that's going to be an adjustment, but I do think he just makes the most sense.
Brian Gaine did interview with the Bills. I did look it up. Not only was that reported, the Bills actually announced it. So back in May 2017, that's a coup. That's like
it's like when you get Rex Ryan and Greg Roman.
Yes, and Greg Roman lasted 5 weeks or whatever it was. Yeah, what a bonus that was.
2 for 1.
Greg Roman almost run out of Baltimore earlier this year.
Imagine Greg Roman gets that head coaching job instead of Rex Ryan. Oof.
But is Brian Dable another Greg Roman in the sense of not, of the sense of the guy who gets mentioned, like, oh, he'll be a head coach someday. I don't know that Greg Roman's going to be a head coach now. It hasn't happened yet.
Greg Roman should never be a head coach. That's my opinion. Unless he changes his stripes dramatically at some point. From what I've heard about him as a behind the scenes kind of manipulator, I think that would be a disaster waiting to happen. I think you could there was some of that comparison to be drawn with Brian Dable. Like, is this guy ready to lead a program? It's a different thing than just being a play caller, but I do think he's grown a lot since his first couple stints. He's moved around. He's separated himself from Bill Belichick, made some mistakes. Derek Anderson says he's a completely different guy in Buffalo than he was in Cleveland, just in terms of not being as much of a hard ass and being more flexible to what players want. So I don't want to drop him in the Greg Roman bucket, because every time Greg Roman's name comes up, I roll my eyes. He's probably the problem in Baltimore, not the one, making things work.
It is always interesting when you talk about coordinators becoming head coaches, because you've seen it work out sometimes, but I feel like there's also so many scenarios where a coordinator doesn't necessarily make a good head coach. So I always think that's interesting to see that transition, and if it does, in fact, end up working out.
Yeah, I think really where Brian Dable changed was when he was with Cleveland. And that is when Eric Mangini, at the very end, went through this metamorphosis where he decided it really backfired on me to come to Cleveland and try to be the next Bill Belichick. And he isolated different people. He froze out the media. He was trying to just imitate Bill Belichick. And he even made the media rounds admitting this and said, I need to change and be more of myself and not just be an a-hole, because that's what I saw Bill Belichick do. And I think that Brian Dable, being on that staff, kind of saw that too, is that if I want a future in this industry, if I want to, I can't just try to imitate. I have to be myself. I have to make friends. I have to be nice. I have to network a little bit. I have to be able to small talk with the media, and Mangini learned that lesson way too late, that you need to have a lot of diplomacy in the role of a head coach, both inside your organization and outside your organization, in your communications and your dealings. Bill Belichick was able to get away with it because he won championships right away. And before anybody really caught on to his act, he already had a couple Lombardi trophies. Save for Cleveland. I mean, they hated him in Cleveland because of what he did with Bernie Kosar, but he was still pretty successful there. And had the Browns not moved to Baltimore, he might have remained their head coach. Anyways, I digress. Jonah, your thoughts on any of this?
Well, I think Matt made a lot of the points I wanted to make, but I would say that this is the natural order of things. If you have a winning program in professional sports and college and anything, your assistant coaches and assistant front office personnel is probably going to get poached by other organizations, and it's a worrisome sign if that doesn't happen. So if I'm a Bills fan, I can't be too worried about that happening and what the effect of that would be. But it would be concerning if there's too much turnover in one offseason. If you lose the offensive and defensive coordinator and you lose multiple people and you're trying to replace them, there's only going to be a limited pool of people who are available to come in and replace those jobs. Too much disruption, too much turnover at the same time could have a negative effect on next season. I don't know where that would manifest, but I don't think it would be an ideal situation to have to replace several of these high-ranking positions.
I think
the numbers tell us that won't happen, right? Like, you can't lose all of them. Nobody's looking at the Bills as such a, model of success that they're going to say we have to have every single piece of it. That doesn't even happen to the best of teams. So I think there's a natural fear for Bills fans when it's like, oh my God, this has never happened. What's going on? Like,
Bills fans also think the worst. Like, they're also going to go to the extreme other end of the spectrum too, where the doubts and all of the bad memories kind of creep in because
how are we going to replace Heath Farwell?
Right. Yeah. This is going to be a mess. There's no way we can, if Leslie Frazier were
say goodbye to Chad O'Shea,
like, right. So I think, maybe they lose. What do we think? Over under 2.5 between the front office and the coaching staff. I'd put the over under at 2.5, and I might take.
You can really only lose your coordinators if they get jobs as promotions, right? So even the assistants, even if they want to get if somebody wants to interview Ken Dorsey to be offensive coordinator, the Bills can deny that because it's the only thing because he's under contract.
Sure, but you could lose.
I don't know everybody's contract exactly, but the only thing that you must permit is a coach getting a chance to a head coaching job, right?
Right, and the same, I think.
There's only going to be so many openings too, and that's the thing. They're not going to take a lateral move, so I guess that might be in their favor too. Is how many openings are there actually going to be?
I think there's a similar rule in the front office too, where you could lose like Brian Daboll and Joe Shane to the Texans or something like that, where they're like a package deal. You could also potentially see a scenario where like Joe Shane goes somewhere and tries to take Dan Morgan, but I think Dan Morgan would probably stay put knowing that his turn's coming, and maybe the only way he could pull that off is if it's somebody lower down the ladder that Joe Shane wanted to pull from and take with him as like an assistant or director of player personnel.
It'll be interesting too to see how Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane handle these situations, these other types of situations where they can say no and deny the chance to interview, but should they? And the reason I bring that up is because there are some organizations or people within them that don't want to be known as a place you don't want to go because you're not going to get the upward mobility. And this is a discussion I've had. Mostly it's a coaching thing than it is front office. But a coach to deny an assistant the chance to interview somewhere else, is that a place you want to work? And for morale, and although it might suck to lose an assistant to go somewhere else,
could be a bad look.
It's a reputation thing of you want your people to be happy. You want them to sign up and work. If I'm Sean McDermott, I'd say I want people to come and work on my staff and be happy and think that they have the chance to improve themselves, even if it's at our expense, because that's the right thing to do. Versus, oh no, you're not going anywhere because you're under contract. That's why. And then do you want that guy to be miserable on your staff? I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they handle that part of it, because there are different ways to do it.
The other interesting thing is that we hear a lot of buzz about Brian Daboll, rightly so, because the offense and Josh Allen are performing so well. But the messaging out of the Bills has mostly been that Leslie Frazier is the guy that's ready for his next head coaching opportunity, and he's been a key to the success on the defense and somebody that it feels like Sean McDermott thinks is head coach material. And it's kind of interesting to see that dynamic where it seems like the organization maybe thinks one person is a better candidate than the other, and the national perception is maybe opposite.
Yeah, that's
Depends
a
what
good
you're
point.
looking for. Like, it depends what you want. If you want that steady hand leader of the program, guy who's been there and seen a lot, I think Leslie Frazier makes more sense than Brian Dable. But the guy that's been more important to the Bills and their on-field success has been Brian Dable. There's also the element of this that, you know, the new Rooney Rule, you know, that's been instituted, you know, the adaptation to it where the team gets a third-round pick if another team hires a minority out of their building. That could be 2 for the Bills if Leslie Frazier and Lake Dawson get hired into general manager or head coaching roles. So
I
there's
also
also
think age comes into this too. I mean, like, I feel like you look around the league and I feel like so many teams are going more towards that young, up and coming head coach guy for their team. And when you're weighing the two options of, yes, Leslie Frazier has all this experience, but Brian Dable could be that more attractive pick because of, you know, he's on the upswing. He's, again, that young up and coming coach. So I think that's a trend that we're also seeing around the league right now.
And Brian Dable has those Hollywood good looks.
I think it would have been interesting had the Browns hired him and a fan base maybe not knowing the difference between him and the previous coach because they are of similar
features.
Yes.
Similar follicle features.
And maybe, you know, around the belt line also.
Yeah.
There was a point I was going to make, and now I'm thinking of.
Well, how picky do you think these guys will be? How picky should Brian Dable be? Should he cash in while there's going to be Chargers?
Yeah, I think you get a chance at a head coaching job, you have to take it.
Look at the jobs available. The Jaguars might get Trevor Lawrence. The Chargers isn't open yet, but we assume Anthony Lynn could be done. Justin Herbert's sitting waiting there. Deshaun Watson's waiting in Houston. Matthew Stafford in Detroit.
The Lions.
Like, there's some good, you know, and then, you know, I don't know. I think there's some
Brian
good,
Dable could have multiple offers. He could have to fight off. I mean, his agent is Bob Lamont, who is one of the big string pullers around the NFL in terms of getting his guys hired, getting interest in them. He's in the wheelhouse of what the NFL wants from its head coaches right now. He hasn't had the job before, so he doesn't have he doesn't have a stink on him from some previous job. He's worked with a young quarterback that he has really helped take from a certain stigma of being inaccurate. There's so much he can go into an interview with and point to as look at what I've done. And there are owners and general managers are going to look at this and say, please do this with our organization.
Especially with the teams you just mentioned. With the quarterbacks you just mentioned and the teams you just mentioned, if they're looking for a guy that has experience developing and making a quarterback into the best version that he can be, and what he's done with Josh Allen, those teams, Jets, Chargers again, that job isn't open, but those are two teams that are dealing with trying to develop a young quarterback.
Yeah, defensive coaches really aren't being hired as head coaches. I know you can say Brian Flores a couple years ago, Vic Fangio, but teams really, by and large, are just looking at offensive-minded coaches. And, of course, Sean McDermott's worked out. He's a defensive-minded coach. But people are looking for that lightning in a bottle. And
Robert Salah's getting some love, the 49ers defensive coordinator. He's probably the hottest defensive name on the market at the moment, but by and large, you're right. It's going to lean offense.
I mean, a guy like Eric Bieniemy, I mean, I'm sure that he's going to get some looks too. Once again, I know he did last season. I'm actually kind of surprised he didn't land anywhere, but yeah, that's another name that kind of pops out as these offensive-minded guys that are, you know, in line or should be in line for a head coaching job soon.
Change of topic here as we still revel in the Bills' division clinching victory over the Denver Broncos on Saturday. The scene out at Buffalo Niagara International Airport, or not I don't know, whatever it is, those, I guess it's the airport, but it was off into those, cargo areas. That is, I guess, I don't know. I've gone just down a mental rabbit hole just now as to what technically that property is. It's the airport. It's the airport. It's happened at the airport. The thousands of Bills fans that showed up on Saturday night, their intentions pure, I think, mostly, although there is an element of, hey, look at us, more than I'm out here because I love my team so much. We can get into that nuance if you'd like. I'm just going to throw this out on the floor. What do we think about the scene that we saw early Sunday morning when the Bills landed on their flight back from Denver? Am I going to take the lead here?
Do we need somebody to argue the Bills fan side? Because I feel like maybe all four of us are going to be on the same side here. And I'll put on my Zubaz hat and counter argue you guys.
That's right. You can be devil's advocate on this in this round table here. I think it's dumb on multiple accounts. I think the primary issue for the Buffalo Bills would be stay away from us. With everything that's going on with COVID and teams being derailed for reasons out of their control, do not yell into our open windows. Players, do not roll down your windows and let people yell in your car. Stay away from us. We don't want to get sick. That's number one. And then number two is the message this sends to Governor Cuomo, who is still deciding whether or not he wants to allow Bills fans into the stadium for the playoffs. And you could say, and you could rationalize and say, well, we were masked but clearly not social distancing. And I think you look at the photos, there were a lot of people not wearing masks, including children.
Including a lot of the people that were up close and personal with the players screaming into vehicles with no masks.
Did not have masks on, or they were pulling them down so they could yell. So you may say, what does this matter as to whether or not the governor wants to execute the Bills' plan that they've put forth, their proposal for having fans in the stadium? Well, what it says to me, if I'm the governor, is, can Bills fans be trusted to be responsible? And whether or not you agree with that, adding that variable to the governor's decision was not smart.
I also just think it sends a message of, we're not taking this seriously. And you look at the protocols, you look at the spikes and the numbers, and we just went through a minor shutdown with gyms and salons, and then they're allowed to be back open. But if you're Governor Cuomo and you're looking at this scene, and these are the same fans that want to be allowed back into the stadium, it doesn't send a good message of, hey, we're taking things seriously that you're saying about social distancing, about wearing masks, because again, not everyone was wearing masks in those pictures. And I just think it'd be very unfortunate if a player or group of players or whoever come down with COVID because of the group of fans that was there. It would be ironic and unfortunate if that is why a player gets sick going into the postseason. I think Tim on Buffalo Kickoff Live a couple weeks ago, I think it was, we did final thoughts. And I know our final thought was, going down the stretch of the regular season, going into the playoffs, they need to take every protocol and every safety measure as seriously as possible to make sure that you don't have an outbreak on the team, in a position group, to be in a situation where Josh Allen comes down with COVID and you're going into the playoffs, or anybody. I mean, it's anybody. Could you imagine if Josh Allen gets COVID because of this fan gathering? So it's just, I understand you want to go cheer on the team. It's a big deal, and that's great. That's awesome. But
Yeah, I can't imagine that Sean McDermott is overly thrilled with it. He's had now, by the time he speaks this afternoon, he'll have had a long time to craft his message. I'm sure he'll do it very carefully because, he loves to, and rightfully so, pump up the fan base and give them lots of love, especially in a year like this one when they can't be connected to the team in the same way. So I know he loves that part of it. But I was reminded of I did a story earlier this year when the Jaguars beat the Bills in the playoffs and got back to Jacksonville. This was like 95 that year, that famous year, the last year the Bills won the AFCs. They got back to Jacksonville. They used to fly just through the airport, and the scene was insanity. And Tom Coughlin said to the players, "We are never flying through this terminal again. Like we're not going to subject ourselves to that ever again." That was not in a pandemic. That was not when, Sean McDermott has been very, hyper paranoid about everything involving COVID because he does not want that to screw up a very good season. And I will say this too. I want to make a point that some reporters and some players stoked the fire on this, right? There were a lot of questions in the post game of like, what do you expect it to be like at the airport? And Micah Hyde said, it's going to be a party. There might be more fans there than 17. Do you think? It might be. I want to challenge them to have more fans tonight than 17 when we made the playoffs.
That was the point I was going to make too, is that players were encouraged.
And then you had the tweets from reporters. This is when the plane lands and the videos of look at all the people that are already here. And then that just creates, especially among the younger crowd who probably doesn't take COVID as seriously because they are in their 20s and YOLO and everything else. They're like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go. It's a Saturday night. I don't have to work tomorrow. Yeah, I'm going to go. And then it just becomes an excuse to party. It becomes a performative thing for a lot of fans to say, yeah, look at us. We're the best fans. There's probably a good chunk of people that were there that hung in the back, wore masks, and legitimately just wanted to feel some sort of connection to the team. And that's totally fine. You're outside, you're wearing a mask, like risk is probably pretty low. But for the big mob scenes, apparently there was a DJ, like a lot of stuff that just like, and for the players, and not all of them, but I think that was mildly reckless on Micah Hyde's part. And I give John Feliciano a lot of credit because he almost like bristled when somebody asked him about the airport. He's like, man, I'm sure it's going to be crazy, but please wear your masks. Please, like, we want you guys there in the stadium. We don't necessarily.
There was some pushback from fans. I just had a tweet yesterday, just as like I was thinking out loud regarding Cuomo and what he might have thought of what he saw. And I had some pushback from fans responding to me on Twitter saying everybody was wearing their masks. Well, first off, everybody wasn't. And if you take a look at, BuffaloNews.com had a photo gallery from Jim McCoy of the scene. You don't have to look hard for people not wearing masks. I would say, just feeling from that photo, and it's from people who were around, the front of the barriers, 30 to 40% were not. And I'm talking about children of, 10 years old, parents standing there, people sitting there with a pile of beer cans also. It was, you got an idea of really what this thing was all about, but
Christmas
you don't
is
have
in
to look
5
hard.
days, by the way. From Saturday, Christmas is right in the sweet spot of the incubation period. So all these people presumably are going to have Christmas with their families, their older relatives. Like from a more practical community standpoint of what this means, sure, the Bills could get it and it could ruin their season. And oh no, some people are probably going to die because of Saturday night. That may sound dramatic and alarmist. We'll never know who did or who, how to, connect the dots there. But that's a lot of people that are probably going to be going home to their families in 5 to 7 days.
I'm honestly surprised that that this was allowed. I'm kind of surprised that there wasn't any kind of barriers or any way to stop this, given that you knew it was coming. I guess that I was surprised by that.
There were some metal barriers, and you can see them pretty well in Jim McCoy's photos. I urge
Yeah,
people to
I
go check
mean-
them out. But that means to me, that's almost like double damning. That means that the police, that was their preparation for it. When maybe their preparation should have been, everybody clear out. You're not allowed to congregate here.
That's my point.
Ride
Is that
around
I'm
in circles
surprised.
with your lights on,
Yes.
constantly saying, no, you can't gather here. You have to leave.
How did they get so close to the
Yeah.
cars? That's what I want to know. Like,
The cars have to drive through there. They have to eventually leave the confines of that gated area.
I feel like
So
they have to do
get on-
something about that. That was the most ridiculous part of it to me. The fact that somebody can be that close to Josh Allen, like, and these players, pandemic or no pandemic, that's like borderline unsafe. And again, they're all posting it on Instagram and they're loving it and they're eating it up, and they haven't had fans in the stadium all year. And I think to Heather's question of like, why wasn't this stopped? Why haven't we seen more pushback on it? Like, polling cars didn't really say anything about it. And there's nothing like that. Everything has become so sensitive to the touch this year. Every little issue, that if you look at the response nationally to people tweeting about all these Bills fans, they're thinking, what the hell are these people doing? Locally, it's come on, lighten up. Let us enjoy this team. Like, don't be a killjoy. And I think probably people like polling cars and other people like that were like, man, trying to stop these people might don't, there's going to be so much backlash. Maybe it'll make it worse. I don't know. I think there's, you look at every little thing when it comes to COVID restrictions and everything else, there's just been so much raw emotion for a lot of people for good reason. People losing their jobs, people, losing family members. Like, it's been a long year. And I think people are afraid to get these people, anybody, the masses all riled up.
And I think that's the devil's advocate part and I know that, Jonah, you were going to kind of argue on the side of the fans.
I am the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
And he's
you're
been awful
the
quiet.
devil's
I guess he doesn't have
advocate.
many,
But I
he doesn't have
am.
many counters.
Well, I'd like to make a point on the fan side really quick. And I think that that's where people, I think, are coming from. And maybe even the players, when they're encouraging this, saying, they probably just lost faith that fans are going to be able to be in the stadium. And they probably say, well, Cuomo's not going to change his mind, and this is how it is. Well, we want to enjoy some kind of fan reaction and interact with them somehow. Well, let's just have it be now, because they're not going to be in the stadium. And I think that was probably the mindset of players and fans. I don't know, Jonah, what do you think on that side?
Yeah, that is kind of the point I was going to make. My personal sensibility is, as you guys have sort of explained, is that this is kind of nutty. Going to the airport to greet a team coming back from a road game is not something I would do under any circumstances, or really understand how that's something that these people felt was very necessary to do. But running on the field and tearing down a goalpost is also crazy. This is just what Bills fans do. They do a lot of wacky things, especially when they're all together in this groupthink type mentality. And as Heather mentioned, I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that they haven't been able to gather, not just at the games in the stadium, but in the Hammers lot and all the different Bills functions and parties and autograph signings that these people
Even at a bar.
Yeah, get together. They've
Road
all
trips.
been tweeting at each other all year, but there's probably Bills fans that see each other every Sunday, every single year, that haven't seen each other in this year. So I sort of understand the emotional motivation that all these fans had to be part of the moment, even though celebrating a division title in the way that this city and even people in the media have in the last few days is a little over the top. But I sort of understand, knowing the history and how Bills fans are, knowing a lot of Bills fans myself, people that were friends of mine were there. I saw a lot of live videos on Facebook from people that went there. So I don't really blame the fans for doing what they normally do. It's Bills fans are going to Bills fan. I think that was what happened there. The fandemonium phrase that came out of that 1988 tearing down the goalpost. That's just who these people are that support the team and go to the games. And Matt made the point earlier that I wanted to make. I think the responsibility is on the team and the players and the security at the airport and the people involved that aren't Bills fans to, if this is a bad thing that can't happen, prevent it from happening and not encourage fans to go and not let them know when the plane's going to land. And I think the Bills really wanted that scene. They wanted the video and the pictures. They wanted to be able to make a hype video of, look at how our fans embraced us and, how great our fans are, and look at this scene. And, Yes, it was disconcerting to see fans yelling into players' cars without masks on, and you worry about what could happen to that. But it's also a little bit concerning that these players opened their windows and were embracing this from the fans. You could have the mask on while you're driving the car if you think you're going to be close to these fans. It was, I think, irresponsible behavior on both sides, and the team and the players and the organization, I think, had the responsibility to be more responsible than the fans who are acting on their, crazy base emotions.
And I think that, and also to make a point too for the fans, again, I think it was irresponsible, but I want to make that point of maybe the mindset and what people were thinking. And even from the players' standpoint, I think it's easy to get caught up in the moment when there is so much emotion, and it was such a monumental moment for this organization, for this franchise, these players that have never been a part of anything like this. They know how much it means. So I will say, I think it's easy to get caught up in the moment and forget for a second what the bigger picture is and what's going on in the rest of the world with this pandemic in those, couple minutes that they're driving or whatever, and, you let your guard down. I think it's easy for that to happen when there is so much emotion happening around you. But at the same time, those little slip-ups is what can completely ruin anything, I guess.
I expected actually, well, maybe not the first thing I'm going to mention, but I wondered if the Bills would put out a statement saying something along the lines of, hey, we love you fans. We know you love us. Please do the responsible thing. Don't show up at the stadium or at the airport. We're going to get together and we're going to, when things get back. I think that would have helped diffuse things if the fans knew, if the Bills were able to put out a statement saying we don't want this. Maybe they still would have shown up anyway, or a smaller group that is much more manageable. I don't know. But the other thing that I thought was going to happen would be Sean McDermott at some point on the flight home, 3 or 4 hours or however long it is, getting with a security detail with the Bills and saying, phone ahead through the cockpit, whatever it is, to Erie County Sheriff's Department, the Cheektowaga Police Department, whoever's in charge there at the airport, and clear those people out.
Yeah.
So we don't, then the players aren't the bad guys or the teams aren't the bad guys. The law enforcement can we work with them. These entities constantly work together. It would have been done quietly. The police would have come out there and said, look, you can't be here. And then the Bills wouldn't have been killjoys. And it would have been, look, this isn't smart. Let's everybody go home. And then nobody would have even been talking about it by Sunday morning. It would have just kind of gone away. But it did create some great video. And it was incredible. It was incredible. I just thought it was reckless.
I'm interested to see what McDermott has to say when he talks today about it. I'm interested to seeing the kind of pushback and seeing everything that happened. I'm interested to see what his response is going to be, because I don't think it can just be, yeah, that was crazy, that was so cool. I don't know how it can be. I think that would just send the complete wrong message. So it'll be interesting to see what he has to say about it.
He is the face of the organization. I mean, he is and as much as Josh Allen's the franchise player. I mean, Sean McDermott, nothing happens football wise or with those Bills or anything public without Sean McDermott signing off on it, either in specificity or in a broader sense of, this is what we're going to do. Everybody then do your jobs within this confine. I think that, it'll be interesting because he wants the fans to be excited, but you can't, like Heather, like you said, you can't just want this to happen. And Matt, I mean, we even discussed this on Saturday night. How long is this going to happen? I mean, is every big game? I mean, is this now a Bills fans thing? Will it ever recede to where there's expectation? I mean, how many, if everybody keeps covering it also, are the fans going to keep coming out there like they did after the Miami game? in which Cincinnati helped them get into the playoffs. And then we saw it last year. Is this now a thing? I think you
like
used to
breaking
see it here
tables.
on occasion, but now is this a thing?
It's like breaking tables. It's, oh, this guy got on Barstool. This guy went viral. You know, that was like barely a thing when I got here in 2014, the whole table smashing thing. Few people do it, gets on Barstool, gets retweeted, all that. And I think the same goes for, that's why, you know, bring up, you know, the media outlets covering it like it was the main story is look at all this and look at when the plane lands and look at what the players had to say. And then it becomes a thing of like, well, yeah, you know, you're, especially when the plane doesn't land till 1, you could be coming down from this victory and still have the news on and be like, oh, geez, the plane lands at 1 o'clock. Oh, hell, I can still get over there. Like, you know, and so that probably led to, I don't know, a swelling of the crowd in some sense. So it's, I would expect Sean McDermott, like I said, has crafted a message pretty carefully here. And, you know, I think he's going to have to toe.
He'll be ready for the question.
Well,
Remember
that's
when
why-
the thing was mask up or back up? That was like the catchphrase over the summer.
Yeah.
That came from McDermott. Bill's social media is tweeting it out, you know, like, hell yeah, mask up or back up. Like we got goals. We got a championship to win. And it's like, well, what happened to that? Josh, you know, when you got a maskless, topless man screaming into Josh Norman's window, like people bang. Also, like, what possesses a human being to do that? Like, you can stand behind the barrier, but like people banging on Stephon Diggs's car, like, I love you so much that I'm gonna bust your hood, man. Like, oh, I love you so much that I'm gonna give you this virus that might derail you for 2 weeks. Like, that's not showing anything except that you're a complete ass. Like,
well,
frankly,
that's why on Twitter, I think there were like multiple people that tagged me in tweets and some other reporters and things like that asking when the plane was landing. And I was like, I'm not engaging in this.
Yeah, it's like, it's weird to have to become part of the, and there's a weird juggling act in, you know, that some media play where it's like, you know, hey, if I hype this up, I'm going to get lots of engagement. If I, you know, hype this up and like, you know, like this is going to be our least popular podcast ever. Like people are going to think we're
It's true.
a bunch of killjoys and we're peeing in people's cornflakes and all that. But like, I mean, frankly, it's just calling a spade a spade. Like you can think what you want about the virus and the lockdowns and whatever else. We're getting pretty close to the finish line here. And like like we've said, at the very least, if you love this team, if you want them to make a run, you would think you would have the common decency to greet them at a distance. Like, hey, thousands of us are going to stand shoulder to shoulder and potentially subject ourselves to this virus and potentially subject however many people in the community to this virus because of whatever.
I'd like this to end at some point.
Right,
I like COVID to end. I would like people to stop dying. Personally,
thing,
I
like,
would like to do things that I was supposed to do this
we all
year.
live here, right? We all live here, and there's however many thousands of people that were there that are then going somewhere else, and then so on and so forth. At the very look, if you want to subject yourself to that, fine. Like, I hope everybody that was there stays in their house for a week, and if they have to leave the house, wear a mask. But to go that close to the players is just beyond like mind blowing to me. Like, I woke up on Sunday morning and was just like, what were these people doing?
I think it's part of the culture in this so-called Bills Mafia, the same kind of brain chemistry that makes you jump through a flaming table and chug vodka out of somebody's butt crack is the same thing that leads you to go to the state, go to the airport and cheer on these teams and gather and wear the funny clothing that people do. And it's, you know, I'm not saying people made this conscious decision, but I think in their hearts, it's, you know, celebrating this division title, being one of 8 teams in the NFL that win a division title, this monumental achievement is more important than limiting the spread of coronavirus and keeping yourself and your family healthy and keeping these players healthy. You know, having that raging party
You
and
want a race with 4 teams in it.
is the goal in life. It's not nothing.
Were there 4 teams in it? One of them is 1 in 13. Like,
Well, from a mathematical standpoint, you won something that had only 3 other teams in it.
I saw in Peter King's column today that the Bills had conquered Mount Belichick. Like, give me a break. Tom Brady left last year. I'm not to diminish what the Bills did. Like, they thoroughly and very emphatically won this division. Took advantage, timing wise, build wise, to coincide perfectly with things falling apart in New England. But things are coming apart in New England. Like, the Bills didn't conquer the Patriots. That would have been last year. This year, they just owned the division. And
Tony Sperano, Chad Pennington, and Ronnie Brown conquered Mount Belichick in 2008.
even they didn't, because
You
Brady.
guys remember what happened to all those guys? You know,
Like, I don't know, there's some hyperbole involved. It's very cool that they won the division for the first time in 25 years, but probably more so for the fact that it feels like they could do it time and time again. Not because they beat a Patriots team that has no semblance of a passing offense and had like 5 defensive starters. The Patriots weren't ever the threat. It was the Dolphins. And that's not the end goal here for this team either. And for the veterans in the locker room have made that point. Like, they're not here to win a division. That's one step to bigger things. But
it was also expected. Like they expected.
They were the betting
win
favorite.
Like they expected to win the division this year. So it's a great accomplishment, but I don't like to see that people put that as bigger than stopping the spread of COVID.
the prime objective right now until the first round of the playoffs is to stay healthy. And to bring this conversation full circle, what happened at 1:00 Sunday morning was not in that script for sure. You added unnecessary variables to the Bills' future success, their immediate future success. And let's say nothing ever happens. That's fine, but that doesn't erase the fact that the risk was introduced.
There's now a non-zero chance.
This is something you need to know. And I think also what anybody listening, if they're upset, this is who you boycott. Tim Graham and Friends is brought to you by Shampoo, Travis, Besaw, and Kirshner, CPAs and business consultants. CTBK is a leading accounting firm with a growing team of accountants and business consultants with roots in Amherst. CTBK pairs every project with a focus on a human connection between its team and the client. For assurance, accounting, taxes, litigation support, and advice on mergers and acquisitions, CTBK is available and ready to solve any issue your business faces. For a consultation or to request a quote or to call and complain about Tim Graham and Friends, call 716-630-2400. Again, that's 716-630-2400. CTBK, over a quarter century of proven accounting and business excellence for Western New York and beyond. Any closing thoughts? Anything we need to add to wrap things up to make sure that we get both sides of the story? To make sure that that shirtless guy screaming in Josh Norman's passenger window is given his proper justice, that his side is laid out for everyone.
I'll say, look, it's been a long year, right? Like, any sliver of normalcy that people can find, they want it. They crave it. We've probably all been there at various points in 2020.
That was normalcy.
For some people.
That was normal.
And I know we can't necessarily put ourselves in the frame of mind where it's normal to scream into a stranger's car. But to some people, what happened on Saturday night was that, I guess, feeling that community, feeling that what you get at a sporting event, the large crowd. But I think all along, those things in particular, even the people that deny this virus, or push back against the lockdowns or whatever else, would have to agree that mass gatherings are one of the last things we get back. And it feels like when we do have a full stadium, hopefully whenever there's a full stadium, it was earned because the virus is gone. And as long as it's there, stuff like that will be cringeworthy. And as long as it's out there, that what people were doing is going to be a terrible, terrible look.
I actually, I agree with everything you said, because I think people just need to keep that bigger picture and that end goal of ending this virus in mind when making certain decisions. I actually got to hop off. I know, Tim, I know you've talked to him. I'm actually talking to Eric Molds. at 1, and it's 1 o'clock, so I gotta
Get
go,
after it.
guys. I will.
after
I
it.
will. Thank you so much for having me. I hope we can do this again.
He had the record, and he never played for a division winner. He was drafted in 1996, so he missed out on any division titles while setting all those records. All right, thanks, Heather. We'll wrap up without you.
Thank you so much. See you guys
Take
soon.
care. Thanks for being a guest.
Thank you.
Come back
Bye-bye.
soon.
Bye.
I will.
Jonah, your closing thoughts? Anything you want to say now that Heather's gone? Maybe.
Yeah, finally. No. No, I think we covered all of it. I mean, one thought I have is that it does appear that at least the Bills believe they have a plan to allow however many fans, 10,000 something, some small number of fans.
They do, and it's been proposed to the governor, and it's been awaiting some sort of approval, or it's waiting
Right.
to be enacted if the governor so chooses.
And maybe they do have a sensible plan that the governor approves, and it allows a certain number of people to be in the stands for that game, friends and family and people like that. But I think what we saw at the airport the other night is that what do you do if you let 7,000 fans in? What do you do about the other 70,000 that are going to want to gather in the parking lots or gather in whatever open space they're able to? And maybe you can't prevent that. And the only way to mitigate against that is to keep the stadium closed and not let anybody in, because how can you say we are allowing these people in, but you have to stay home? You can't gather anywhere privately or any open space where you can bring your tables and your pinto and whatever you guys do with your food. You can't do that, which is so much a part of being a Bills fan, almost more so than going to the games and watching the games. It's these, Bills fan gatherings. And I just don't know how you can have a playoff game with some fans and not have these big swells of people gathering somewhere else.
Whatever Erie County sheriffs and Orchard Park police do to keep people out of those lots, those public lots, on Sundays, because they made it clear that you weren't going to be down there tailgating if there weren't any fans. Whatever they did, I'm just surprised they didn't do that at the airport, because they had to have known that this was going to happen. And they had several hours lead time. They probably should have been ready for it week in advance. But even once it became clear that this was going to be a thing, that they couldn't been mobilized to clear those, to make sure that the gathering didn't happen to begin with. But then we wouldn't have had that great footage.
That's true. Wouldn't have had that for the playoff hype video. Be curious to see if it's the type of thing that gets folded into that. How much they embrace. There has not been all that.
We'll
much
find out on
backlash.
Sunday, right? Because it's another road game, and the Bills will probably win, or they should win, in Foxborough, and the fans will be excited about that, not because of a division title, but because it's a win in Foxborough.
They won't be at the airport after they beat the Patriots, I don't think.
They
Monday
might.
Night football, that's going to be what, 3 a.m. they get
Look,
back? Well, maybe not, because
if it's allowed, some of these people will go.
You know what? It
won't be as much of an event as it was, but there will be people there.
You might be right that it will be viewed as, hey,
It's a new thing to do.
those people could do it. This is my way to say hi to the Bills. I usually go to my one game a year. Maybe I'll go to my one airport gathering a year instead,
Or like we were talking earlier, it's a thing now. This could just be a standard thing now.
Especially because they're not going to have an airport to gather at in the playoff game, because it's going to be at home.
Right?
So
This is the last chance.
Well, and what about
chance.
And it's
If
Christmas
they go
break,
and-
so you'll have some people who don't need to get up on Tuesday morning. I'm sorry, Jonah. What's
Well, I was gonna say, if they go on the road and lose in a playoff game, then you got kind of the gathering at Niagara Square to, thank Scott Norwood for missing a field goal type dynamic. I feel like you'll get a lot of.
Well, they did that last year when they lost to Houston. That was a huge gathering.
Yeah, so that's coming. There's going to be more, parties at the airport, parties in the plaza at the airport.
I feel like it should be like, pandemic aside, the ruling on airports should be like, same as like storming the court or, storming the field. Like if you beat the Patriots, who've already been eliminated from the playoffs, like that's like Clemson, storming the field after beating Pitt, like it's supposed to happen. Like at some point you got to act like, there were some people that like, like I said, I get that people have this like real desire to like it really sucks for fans that the best team they've had in 25 years happens to come in the year where they can't be there at all. But there were like, some people, not a ton, but just some that went by the stadium to hang out after the game. It was like all
Take
lit up with AFC's chants and take pictures and like, I don't know, just like get out and about and feel like they were there and just like be there and appreciate the moment. Like there's just such a big difference between the majority of fans who enjoyed this responsibly and like adults and handled themselves and enjoyed it earnestly and wholesomely. And then you had probably a couple thousand that just behaved like children, essentially, that had been told, oh, you can't do this, but oh, we'll do this, and just scream and yell. And there was all sorts of trash left behind. It's just like, I don't know, it is. But what's done is done.
Think about the hype video. I mean, how much do we love those? And especially as a journalist, you always want to see what the hype video looks like in the end, and how you got there isn't quite.
I wonder if the Bills will use it.
Video looks like.
If Sean McDermott does not condone this, then it may not appear in the hype video.
That's what I'm curious about, because they'll probably do like a hype video heading into the playoffs, and that would be logical footage to have. But there's just there's an element of optics at play here that isn't normally, something that they have to think about when it comes to the crowds and everything else. And I'll be curious to see what Sean says and how much they use it going forward, as whether it's now or if they don't use it now, they'll slip it in at some point in the future, right? When this is all behind us, everybody's had a vaccine. It'll be like, man, remember that scene at the airport? Best fans in the league. It's like, or maybe, other fans are just like, hey, maybe I shouldn't go gather by the thousands for winning a division championship. Like,
but Tim, do you have or Matt, do you have an impression that that's coming, that Sean McDermott didn't condone it and is going to say something about it? Because I saw a lot of, maybe not explicitly, but a lot of condoning from Bills players and people in the organization. It seems like they very much wanted
and media. So frankly, the question is probably going to be posed early on as a, what how about that scene? And it'll be like, man, unbelievable, huh? Like, best fans, it's just love our fans, man. Love those guys. And unless the question gets asked, which, I'll raise my hand, but you're right. There's probably a lot of people that don't have that top of mind to ask them about, or, it's kind of floated by as, like I said, nationally, I think people look at it and say, what the hell are these people doing? But locally, like, look at Tim probably has the firsthand data points better than anybody with his tweet yesterday. And all the replies to it are like, come on, man. Like, really? Like, you're really gonna, do this to the fans? Like, they're just trying to enjoy themselves. Don't be the fun police. Like, so I don't know. I would assume he's prepared for it. He's had 48 hours. Normally he talks the day after a game. He's had, about almost 48 hours.
The same concerns that I posed at the very beginning of introducing this topic of getting sick potentially, or adding just the added, even if it's 2 percentage points higher, possibility of actually contracting COVID, and fans in the stands. Those are two things that Sean McDermott is interested in. He would love to have fans in the stands for the playoff game.
They've been saying it since the beginning. It adds
that much of an advantage to the team on the scoreboard.
Yeah, even if you don't want to take anything we're saying about the community and the spread of this thing seriously, if you're you probably turned this off a long time ago if that's you, but even if none of that is important to you and you think we're being alarmist, you would think that you would care about what you just talked about, the health of the players and the possibility of fans in the stands, both of which were put in jeopardy by what, call it a very loud and unruly minority if you want, but they put that in jeopardy by what they did on early Sunday morning. I think Sean McDermott would appreciate that. I think Sean McDermott would probably got in his car or got home and thought, that was probably worrying him. Like the number one thing I bet that was worrying him was the health and safety of his players. Number one, above all else. And that was clearly not worrying, a handful of people that needed to get up close to the cars.
Well, so much for a short show today.
We had some things on
So
our mind.
much. And
We're at
still
about
so
an
much
hour.
more we could talk about.
Well, my thanks to Heather Prusak of Channel 4 for coming on. My thanks, as always, to Matthew Fairburn of The Athletic and Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Global Systems. Until next time, have a Merry Christmas, all the happy holidays, because I am not trying to eliminate happy holidays.
Where are you
Until
going
next
with
time. Oh, Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK.